I'm making a really quick video because I'm about to go out, but I don't know if I will have time the rest of the day, and I want to at least say some of this today because it's the 18th and then tomorrow's the 19th, which are my last 2 days to really talk about mental health. And I still will, because I feel like things have become more embodied this last week-ish. So to me, that definitely goes first compared to just talking to myself and making words with myself. And I just finished watching the Fly Whisperer clip, and I didn't put any commentary in there because I'm actually talking in nature and talking to the flies, and the commentary is already in there. And it's interesting that I say I wouldn't hurt a fly, yet after that experience with the flies, a month later, I was diagnosed with bipolar, which kind of pins one into a category of potentially dangerous. And I still feel now that I wouldn't hurt a fly. I shared a video of a fly drinking out of my eye, and that's pretty weird and crazy, but that's kind of what I am. I am definitely a crazy person. I don't think I'm a mentally ill person, but I'm a crazy person. And when the flies kept flying at my head, it felt like perhaps in that state, the light in my eyes was just as strong as the light of the sun or different things. And they also flew at the camera of the phone. So it has something to do with this witnessing and this light something or other. And interestingly enough, while I was watching the fly video, there was a fly on my thumb while I was walking along watching it. And then it was sitting on my phone. And then I was looking at it, and just at that moment, a hummingbird flew right in front of me, like right there. And it hovered there. And I looked at it with astonishment and awe. And I put my finger out like this for him to land. And when I did, he didn't immediately fly away, but he didn't land either, unfortunately, but he stayed there. And then he flew away. And I've never had one that close to me and so obviously fly right up to me. And I found it interesting that I was watching the video I made 6 years ago, that at the time, right after watching it, I felt like there was some power to it, or like I was just in this powerful state where people and animals sort of get along and there's a different communication going on apart from the regular dialogue of, oh, that's a gross housefly, let's kill it. It was something completely different, and there was this understanding between myself and the flies that I wasn't going to harm them and they weren't going to harm me, and we had this little dialogue and a little commentary, and this little story unfolded that showed that there's commonalities between all creatures. Or if we even just put human characters on flies, then it's a little bit more interesting than the story that we tell ourselves about certain creatures to write them off or disassemble them or put them to our own uses. And interestingly enough, I went on a walk yesterday with some friends, and we were asking each other what our power animal is, and I was saying a bear, and then I actually said that I think my power animal is a hummingbird because I heard the little hummingbird call, and I said, oh, it's a hummingbird. And somebody said, oh, that was a hummingbird, you can hear that? I'm like, yeah, I can probably pick out where it is too, just by where it was calling from. And so that happened first, and so I was like, oh, the hummingbird's my power animal, and that's one of the things I'm going to miss the most when I go back home, is the hummingbird. And then the next day, while watching this powerful fly video that I made, at least subjectively it feels powerful, the hummingbird flew right in front of me after saying the hummingbird's my power animal, and it just felt magical. And I feel like these subtle magical elements are coming back in. And yesterday I read that Dion V. Mall excerpt where he's saying that there is this magic and we can bring it into a moment, and this is the real us, this is the real you, and it's a madness, and it's something that most people fail to really understand, and it gets turned into a personal madness. And oddly enough, I was talking to that person I've been referring to, and I was saying to him how is it that you were able to go through this and not go crazy or be interpreted as crazy? I said, a person would go crazy usually, or something like that. And his response was, you can't be a person. And to me, that sounds a lot like being the moment and not the person. And the magic of the hummingbird coming in that moment was actually me, was that magic that we all have. And it wasn't something separate from me. The hummingbird came to meet me, and that energy brought that there. And I felt like just witnessing myself in that video, being so in communion with these silly little flies. The hummingbird sensed that space, like watching that brought that space back somehow, and just came right into that space and joined in. And to me, it felt quite profound, yet not surprising at the same time. And so, yeah, it was really, really cool. And to me, it's really interesting watching the Fly Whisper video, because so many of the elements of the story that unfolds in that actually play out in my life afterwards. Being diagnosed as crazy, being suicidal. Unfortunately, in the video, I used the language, don't commit suicide to the fly, and had I had updated language, I probably would have said, don't end your life, or you don't want to die by suicide, and things that people say now, that it's being, the subtle languaging is important. And so, yeah, I wasn't there then. I apologize. And so that whole story unfolded pre-diagnosis, and that was actually the height of my 2-month experience. It was a month to the peak and then a month downhill before I was put in the psych ward. And I wasn't able to be with that. And there's a really important thing in Dr. David Hawkins' Power versus Force book, when he's talking about the scale of consciousness, and he's talking about the level of peace, and it's the level of 600. And to me, this describes that state I was in. It says, this energy field is associated with the experience designated by such terms as transcendence, self-realization, and God consciousness. It's extremely rare, attained by only 1 in 10 million people. When this state is reached, the distinction between subject and object disappears, and there's no specific focal point of perception. Perception at the level of 600 and above is sometimes reported as occurring in slow motion, suspended in time and space, nothing stationary, and all is alive and radiant. Although this world is the same as the one seen by others, it has become continuously flowing, evolving in an exquisitely coordinated evolutionary dance in which significance and source are overwhelming. The awesome revelation takes place non-rationally, so that there is an infinite silence in the mind which has stopped conceptualizing. That which is witnessing and that which is witnessed take on the same identity. The observer dissolves into the landscape and becomes equally the observed. Great works of art, music, architecture, and that calibrate between 600 and 700. And can transport us temporarily to higher levels of consciousness and are universally recognized as inspirational and timeless. That wasn't the one I wanted to read actually, but that could be maybe the next point, where subject and object kind of disappear in a way and perception changes. So this level of peace is talking about perceptual changes that I talk a lot about. So what I wanted to read was the level of joy, which is 540. As love becomes more and more unconditional, it begins to be experienced as inner joy. Joy arises from within each moment of existence, rather than from any other source. 540 is also the level of healing and of spirituality based on self-help groups. From 540 up is the domain of saints and advanced students and healers. A capacity for enormous patience and the persistence of a positive attitude in the face of prolonged adversity is characteristic of this energy field. The hallmark of this state is compassion. People who have attained this level have a notable effect on others. They're capable of prolonged open gaze, which induces a state of love and peace. At the high 500s, the world is seen as illuminated by the exquisite beauty of perfection of creation. Everything happens effortlessly and by synchronicity. A presence is felt whose power facilitates phenomena outside conventional expectations of reality, termed miraculous by the ordinary observer. Near-death experiences, characteristically transformative in their effect, have frequently allowed people to experience the energy between 540 and 600. So I don't remember that one being the exact one I wanted to read either, but the unconditional love is really important, and I did in this state have unconditional positive love and regard for the flies. And I'm not saying I'm in that state all the time, but I was in that space and actually captured it on video, and it was an example of what can happen in that space. And it might seem so insignificant, but the feeling itself of being there wasn't insignificant. It actually was insignificant because I didn't feel anything. It was only watching it after that I really saw myself and saw the state I was in, and it probably really scared me. And after that day, I really did fall out of that state and go to the bottom and really have to deal with a lot of negative energies. And it's sort of like being in that high state and then something coming in and saying, well, this is why you can't remain there. All this negativity and past and collective unconsciousness and the suffering of humanity. And I think that it was a calibration from this high level of joy to all those lower states of consciousness that Dr. David Hawkins describes. But there was one in here that talks about creatures getting along in a different way. So somewhere in there was what struck me before when I read it, and I don't know exactly what it is, but perhaps when the perception change happens where the distinction between subject and object disappears at that level of peace, the flies are as much me as I am the flies, and they are me as much as they are them, etc. It's all one thing. So when one is then in the energy field of just being all one flowing, there's no subject and object, then the objects respond differently because they're part of the energy field and no longer being separated through lower constructs of consciousness in terms of different thoughts and things like that. So I really felt that I was in that higher state for a while, and doesn't matter. I'm just sharing as showing how I was before I was ever diagnosed, and then a month later I was hospitalized, and then 6 years later I'm finally off the meds and feeling like I may have the opportunity to be reacquainted with some of these higher levels of consciousness. And I wonder if I've integrated enough of those lower energies to not fall into them so much. And this person that I've been acquainted with, we were having a conversation, and he just sort of blurted out that when this transition happens, it can be really painful for the body for a day. He's like, just ride it out for a day or something. And he was alluding to things that I'm kind of wondering about. I feel like it's going to come back, and this person might actually provoke it coming back just by their presence. And I'm a little afraid because I've had people tell me stay grounded, and I feel stay grounded, you're going home in a month, stay grounded. But then there's this person who might invite that energy, and I'm not saying it's dependent on a person, I don't know, but it could be sped up or facilitated, and I really have no idea. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's just really interesting timing with all of this, and how I actually feel after the next 2 days I won't feel the need to talk to myself so much and just really go with the days and make little videos about the days, but not get into extrapolations until later, perhaps when I'm home and settled, and just really live out this next month and see what happens, and talk about that, but not so much about the extrapolations. And yeah, so I feel like the fly video was quite prophetic in a way, and it talks about things that I then later went through, and it seems like that whole story is woven throughout my life since, and really wanting to get back to that innocent perception of just being with nature, and then the magic of the hummingbird. So things are becoming a little more magical as I'm about to step more into being reacquainted with that magic, instead of feeling like it's something else, the story given to me that I've talked myself out of. And yet at the same time, I'm sort of afraid of whatever this next story will be. I thought it would be just take it easy and coast back home when it's time in a month, but I'm not sure it's going to be that way, and I don't know really what's going to happen. So, and today is actually 5 months since my crisis in January, that really difficult one that I got through with the help of my family, my community, and taking lots of extra Seroquel. So it's been 5 months since that. And yesterday I went to some river pools and then did a nice hike. I got a ton of bug bites, and I was reading the first chapter of Veronica's new book, How to Talk to Yourself, or whatever she called it. And it really is probably talking about what I've been doing with myself for the past year, but just didn't write a book about it. I've just been doing it, talking to myself, and I've noticed too, since I've been off the meds, I'm getting goosebumps more. I can feel more. And the other weird thing that happened yesterday is the third song my new friend played on his phone when we were driving to the river pools was one of my favorite songs of all time, which is Cry For You by September, and it's not a common song in this part of the world, so it was kind of an interesting sign. He plays the same music, likes the same music, and yeah, I don't know what that's all about, and I'm just really curious. So I do want to do another video talking a bit more about the veronica.org stuff, and I'm losing my voice, and that could be a sign that it's time to stop talking, time to start living. And I've had that sense before, but I came back to talking to myself in a big way, and we'll see if it's time to stop talking to myself and just live, and maybe make videos of living, or I really don't know. There is a bit more I want to talk about, and I think I covered most of it. And I just want to remind myself what Dion Vimal said. A part of it was the impossible. This is the madness that is there. It's hard to make sense of this for most, but it is there. And I have a sense that it is there. There is this madness, there is this magic. And my self-dialogue has been partially making sense of this. And it takes a lot of energy to actually make sense of something that is of such high energy and such immensity and such mysteriousness. And I've re-entered the mystery, and there's this mysterious person sort of leading me back to the mystery, and wondering if I should just run and just go about it slowly by myself, or if I should move into that and see what happens. And then Dion Vimal says, and then this life is a life of bringing this magic to this reality for a brief moment. The work is to be anchored to this, to be embodied to this. And one time I was speaking with him online, and he called me Aletheia, and I picked out that word. It's a Greek word meaning truth, and he said, welcome, Aletheia. And I was crying, and I felt so much, and I was confused, and since then it's been quite a journey, and I haven't really talked to him since, and I feel like he left me alone to figure it out for myself, because I've heard him say in some of his talks things like something, 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 if you can survive it. So it's not something that is survivable all the time, and I don't know if I will survive, but perhaps this dialogue with myself will. And yeah, we'll see. So I want to email Veronica in the next couple of days and watch that Guru documentary. The good thing is the Guru documentary and watching Wonder Woman and the altruism thing I'm going to start with and start creating is part of embodiment, or moving into a completely different context of not just creating context to move one away from a certain paradigm, but creating and moving into a completely new and magical and mysterious context, and really being with that unknown and moving in that unknown. And I wonder if something will happen this time, and not a happening that happens to place me in the authority of experience, like the system that would medicate people away from trying to understand this magic. And that's what I was trying to talk to my friend about today, was he seems to be living in this magic, and those are my words, and he doesn't seem to understand that a lot of people who go through this end up pathologized, and they don't then ever get the chance to begin to understand these new sensitivities and start from zero and learn about the world fresh. And I've talked about all the things that he talks about, but from his perspective of never being pathologized. So 2 different paths, I guess. And I wonder if I can be vulnerable enough to step into that dimension. And I think I do need to drop the mental illness dialogue in order to do that, because if I have that at all, it's going to make me afraid of myself and afraid of this energy, and I don't want that. So, and I don't even want to say I don't want that. I just am. And something happens. I thought of another thing that Dion Biamal said. He said, "I know it feels kind of schizophrenic, but it will have to do for now." And to me, he's talking about how we're all trying to figure out this magic. And usually when we get lost in trying to figure it out, a lot of people get labeled with schizophrenia, and it gets turned into something like that. But really, we're contacting this magic and trying to make sense of the immense. And it's really contacting that level of joy and then falling out of it and going from oneness to duality. And it's really trying to decode a mystery that as soon as you decode it, the code changes. So I will go more into that another time. I might make another video today, or maybe just tomorrow, and then it'll be the 1-year mark. And I talked about with myself possibly watching the videos I made from a year ago, but I feel that right now might not be a good time to do that, just because my brain is sort of sensitive and I'm wanting to continue to move forward and not really move backwards. I feel like it might be a good time to watch those once I get home and settle in, and if I need to go back to that for some reason. Otherwise, I'll probably just keep going for now, and at some point I can watch those and then maybe talk about those. I don't know. So I wanted to add that little bit.